Hello, students. Welcome to today's class. Today, we're going to talk about introduction to sports governance. As I mentioned previously, so sport administration class we have divided into two parts. First half of the semester, in the first 7 weeks, we spend time to talking about the how we are able to develop a strategic plan, how we can develop our leadership skills, and how we're able to organize in each department. We'll talk about human resource management, budgeting, and risk management. So we consider a sports organization from a manager's perspective, right? So all those topics are related to sports administrations. And the second half of the semester, the topic will be focusing on sports governance. So basically, I want you to think about when we are a manager in the future, when we are working in the governing bodies, how we're able to develop a policy to make sure all the members are following the policy we develops, and how we're going to make sure the policy we develops is a fair policy to all the members. Right? How are we going to make sure the policy we develop is serve as the best interest of all the members? Right. So this is the purpose for the sports governance. So sports governance class, we're gonna talk about brief introduction today. In the next lecture, we're gonna talk about how could we develop policies. And after that, we're gonna look at different sports industry. We look at college sport, we look at high school athletics, we look at professional sport in the United States, professional sport in Europe, professional individual sports, Olympic sport and international sports organization would like to look at how those sports organization, sports industry has been organized by using all the different policies, what their structure looks like, whether there are any differences into their structure and policies. So we're gonna spend more time to look at it one by one. So in today's class, we'll just give you a brief introduction of what the sports governance means. And when we look at the agendas, there are 4 topics we'll be covering. First one, we're going to introduce a little bit about the new concept is the governing bodies, right? And then we're going to compare the differences between sports organization and governing bodies. And the second thing, we're going to introduce a little bit about governance, and also we talk about 5 R's of good governance in sports. And the third part, we're going to look at organizational units in sports governing bodies. Last part, we'll talk about 2 very crucial legal documents that really help us to develop a policy within the industry setters. So one is the constitutions, another one is by law. So in the first couple of weeks, we spent time to talk about organization. Anyone still remember the definition of the organization? Right, an organization is the entity that allow for a group or 2 or more to work together effectively in order to achieve goals. Right, organization, the reason we have the organization is because people want to work together, and also because we set the goal and we want to achieve these goals. Right, so governing body is a group of the people, and they have the authorities to exercise governance over organization or political entity. So they basically have the power to determine those policy rules, and also they have the power to ask a lot of other organizations to follow the rule they develops within their industry setters. So I'll give you a couple examples. First example is a World Trade Organization, WTO. Anyone know what the WTO do? So World Trade Organization develops right after World War II. So basically, the purpose for the World Trade Organization is they try to promote free trade among those members, right? So if the country they decide to join WTO, they will have to agree to lower their tariff, and then other members they can sell the product to the country and enjoy the low tax, right? So they could benefit from both parties, right? For the countries that import the products from the other countries, so they could benefit their own customers, right? For the country that export the product to the new markets, so they're able to generate revenues. So it's kind of like a win-wins, right? So that's the purpose for the WTO. They try to promote free trade among the members, right? And the second example is the WHO. And this is this name I think we heard a lot when we are facing the the coronavirus outbreak, right? What's the WHO do? So basically, they develop a standards for food securities and health safety. Then the entire world has to follow, right? So those are international governing bodies. And we also have some example for the domestic governing bodies. First one is FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration. So there's a part of the Department of the Health and Human Service. So its purpose to protect public health through control and supervision of the food safety, tobacco products, and animal foods and feeds. So those are what the FDA does. And also CDC is also another national governing body that we're pretty familiar with when we're facing coronavirus outbreak and also facing during the flu season. We heard this name a lot. CDC is a Center for Disease Control and Prevention, right? So this also under the Department of Health and Human Service. They're trying to protect public health, and particularly they're mainly focusing on the infection disease, like flus, every flu season. So CDC have to do is they have to keep track on the flu seasons, like how many patient has been infected, and also they're going to introduce some policy and introduce some strategy, try to enhance those the disease, try to control this disease, right? So those are what the purpose for CDCs. So in sports industry, we also have a lot of governing bodies, right? And we have a governing body in three different levels. We have an international level, we have national level, we also have a local levels. Right, for the international levels, some examples some students might know, right? IOC, which is International Olympic Committee, right? We have the IOC. The purpose of the IOC is to basically promote the Olympic value worldwide, and also making sure the Olympic Games has been organized successfully. And IOC is also to oversee all those national governing bodies in each of the countries, such as U.S. Olympic Committees, Canadian Olympic Committee. So they all has been overseen by the IOC. Right, another example is the FIFA. Right, FIFA is an international governing body for soccer, these particular sports. Right, so FIFA, we know every 4 years FIFA organizes the FIFA World Cups. So they set the rule to decide which continents could have how many members to qualify for the World Cups, right? So 2026 World Cup will be taking place in the United States, right? So there will be 48 teams participating in the 2026 World Cups. So they will set the rule. They say, okay, South America, right? Only they have 10 countries in South America, but because the quality of the football is very high in South America, so they could have 6 members to qualify for the FIFA World Cups. Asia, they have 48 members in Asia, but the entire quality of the soccer is pretty low in Asia, so they can only have 6 members, right? So they need to make sure they are going to organize an event that achieve basically the high quality of the team from all the different continents, right? So this is a FIFA, which is also an international governing bodies. We have a lot of national governing bodies in sports. The NCAA, right, is a national governing bodies. Another example is USA Track and Field, right, national governing bodies. Right, we also have local level, like Ohio High School Athletics Association. Or we have a lot of like school districts. They have athletic associations, right? So those are local levels of governing bodies. So they basically oversee the members in the particular areas, right? All these governing bodies we talked about previously, they all have showed they have regulatory powers over the members. So they have the ability to set the rule, right? They have the ability to enforce the rule and also impose the punishment if that's necessary. So which means if the members not following what they ask them to do, they could punish them, right? We're using NCAA as an example. We know NCAA have 3 divisions, right? A lot of different institutions, about 1,200 of institutions. They are NCAA members. There are 3 divisions. D1, D2, D3. D1 also we have FBS school, FCS school, and some school without sponsoring football. Right, three different types of the governing bodies members. So they all have to follow the rule introduced by NCAA. So if you're not following the rule introduced by NCAA, you might lose your memberships. NCAA does have the power to punish you if you don't follow what they ask you to do. For instance, NCAA introduced Title IX. We talk about Title IX purposely. Right? If you don't follow the Title IX rule, you might lose your eligibilities. Right? So those are the power the NCAA has, the governing bodies has. So what is sports governance based on Australian Sports Commissions in 2014? So they introduced the definition. They say governance is a structure and process utilized by organizations to develop its strategic goals, directions, monitor its performance against the goals, and ensure that is brought at it in the best interest of the members. Right. So the governance basically have three purposes: develop strategic goal and direction, and also making sure the performance is supporting, helping you to achieve these goals, and also making sure every decision you make is actually protect the best interests of the members. Right. So in the decision-making process, the governing bodies they also play a very important roles. We'll give you an example. So in the NHL, when Rams decided to relocate it from St. Louis to Los Angeles. So this decision obviously is very controversial. This decision need to be approved by the MFL, right? So obviously this decision will impact a lot of stakeholders, like investor. They will impact investor, fans from St. Louis obviously not happy that they have the only professional football team decide to relocate to new markets, right? They impact a lot of sponsors, particularly sponsor from St. Louis, right? And also impact about the team's interest, right? So this is a decision that sometimes you always have to make as organizations. So this is about good sports governance. A lot of people like confused about the governance and management. So what are the differences between the governance and management? So that's one code I'm showing to you. They say management is about running the business. Governance is about seeing you running it properly. So another way to say that is like management is telling you we need to do right things, make sure that we are able to achieve the goal, right? And the governance is we do things right. So make sure the policy and the rule we introduce is a fair decision we make is ethical to everyone who got involved, right? So those are the big difference, right? And we'll give you example. The management. So you have to think about, you have to make a decision about funding relocation, right? So next financial year we have 10 departments. Why I'm giving them this much money for this department? Why I'm giving the other department this kind of money? So you are making that decisions. But the governance is basically is talking about when you relocate these funding sources, whether you are making a fair decision, whether you treat every department fairly, right? So what rule do you use when you decide to allocate these resources, financial resources, to all the departments? So those are the difference between governance and management. You have to know like governance structure is a very different in different industry and also in different markets. We'll give you an example like professional sports league in the US and Europe. There are a lot of differences, right? One of the biggest difference for people who follow professional sports league in Europe, like English Premier League, if you follow that, English Premier League, they have something called promotion and relegation, right? So this policy, this rule has not been utilized in the US. So what's promotion and relegation? We'll give you a quick example. So this is a standing of the English Premier League, right? And when you look at the standing for English Premier League, you find out some team were using different color. Like see, this will give you different color, right? Some team were using different color, right? The team finishing on top are able to play at the European Champions League, which is higher levels of competitions, right? And team in the bottom three, they also been highlighted because they will be playing a lower divisions for next seasons if they keep this ranking. So they're using promotion relegation policy. The purpose is to try to enhance the competitions levels and making sure everyone try their really best during the competitions. Right. So those strategy has been utilized in Europe but not being utilized in the US. In the US, what strategy do we use to enhance the competition levels? We're using territory right. It was a territory right. So basically they prohibit other members to promote their games in new territories. Right, so that's the territory, right? We also introduce the policies like salary cap, right? The purpose of salary cap is also that we try to prevent the team from having too many best athletes in the teams, right? We try to make the competition become very interesting, giving everyone the opportunities and to win these titles, right? So those are the differences when we look at their governance structures, right? And also the differences is the role of the governments involved in sports are also very different, right? There are three different types of model. The first model is a very common model is sport has been governed in the federal governments, right? In Canada, for instance, they have a ministry of the sports in their federal government, so they oversee how sport has been developed in Canada. Right, but a lot of countries they don't have a sports administrations directly controlled in this federal government, central government, but they have like a Ministry of Education and Culture and can oversee sports development in that particular countries, such as in the UK. US is kind of unique. US possibly is one of the few countries in the world that they don't really have a like federal government's controls over the sports developments in the United States. So White House does have the office on Olympic and Paralympic and youth sports, but they don't give funding directly to the members. So basically that more like an advising role rather than just like governing bodies in the US, right? So this kind of differences among different markets. Okay, we talk about governance. We talk about differences between governance and management. And the next topic we're going to talk about is what is a good governance, right? In sports, how are we going to evaluate whether the governance is good or not? So there are 5 R. We normally use that. First one is regulation. The second one is rule. And third one is ranking, and then we talk about records and also talk about results. Right, the first one is regulation. Right, regulation means we have a report organizational governance structures, like we have a constitution, we have a legal mechanism, we have a selection criteria and others. So it means that we have a very good structure to oversee how those policy and rules has been implemented and enforced in the systems, right? Governing body, you're not just introduce the rules, but you also make sure the rules has been implemented and enforced in the system. So this is what the regulation is about. Rule is about technical rules of officializations and managements of the respective sports competitive events, right? So I'll give you example. For these triathletes, right? Possibly if they want to qualify for the Olympic Games, so they would like to know about the rules. Who set the rules? USA Track and Field. If you're American athlete, right, you have to follow the rule introduced by USA Track and Field. So basically, USA Track and Field will require you say, or athletes, if you want to participate at the Olympic Games to represent the United States, you will have to participate in Olympic tri, right? Finishing top 3 in each event, then you can qualify for the Olympic Games. However, if you got injuries, right, if you miss out these opportunities, and then you will not be able to qualify for the Olympic Games. So those are the rules has been introduced by the USA Track and Field, right? So those are about the regulation and rules. We'll give you another examples here. So we talk a little bit about the drug tax examples. Some of you might have heard about WADA, right? World Anti-Doping Agency. It's a governing bodies in the world that overseeing drug testing and to try to make sure athletes from not using performance enhanced drug to improve their performance. Right, so in the U.S., we have USADA, United States Anti-Doping Agency. Right, so they basically conduct the drug test to see whether athletes using performance enhanced drug in the U.S. Right, so WADA basically they introduce a lot of different rules. So they work with the third party to conduct these doping tests. So normally two types of doping tests will be conducted. One is in competition doping test, like when you compete at the Olympic Games, at the USA swimming trial, for instance, you will have to, accept the drug test, a doping test, right? So normally this will be conducted by event organizers. And the second type is called out of competitions doping test, right? So that's a website called Whereabout. If you're the athletes, right, you will have to go and provide the update over there and let the WADA know where you will be in the future, right? For instance, you're currently preparing for the Olympic Games. So currently you're training at Miami University, right? So next week you also plan to train in Miami universities. So you need to go to the website called Whereabout to let them know what your next week's plans are. For instance, Monday. So I will be training 9 to 5. So I'll be in the venue and then I stay at my house, right? So you have to let them know every time where you're gonna be. So those examiner will go and find you based on the information you provide online, and they're gonna see whether they're gonna conduct these doping tests. So if you change the locations, right? So you have to keep the update over theirs, right? Otherwise, if you don't show up, you'll be considered as you miss one doping test. If you miss 3 doping tests in one calendar year, you'll be suspended, right? So it's very, very crucial for you to be there when the nurse is actually getting the blood from you, right? So that's actually very important. But if the athlete who failed the doping test, right, USDA, if American athlete failed the doping test, right, USDA can punish these validated athletes and collecting all the evidence to decide whether athletes will be banned for 1 year or 4 years, right? But a lot of athletes, they say, I failed a doping test, but I did not use performance enhancing drug purposely. Maybe I eat some food that's not clean, has been poisoned, so I'm innocent, right? So you're not happy with the decision made by the US anti-doping agency, right? So you can go to CAS. CAS is a court of authority of sports, so you can appeal in the CAS. CAS will make the final decision whether they will uphold the decision set by the USDA, or they will help you to say, oh, this punishment introduced by the USDA is illegal, so I will give you freedom, so you are clean athletes. So those are the entire doping test systems, how those governing body collaborated, work together, who set the rule. That WADA set the rule. Every year, WADA will update the list, let you know what will be the new symptom or drugs has been considered as a drug will improve athletes' performance, right? So this is about regulations and rules. Another 3 are: one is ranking, right? Report performance based on the result and competition criteria. All the competition, particular sports competition, we have a rankings determine who will perform better, right? We have a record the best performance ever accomplished by the athlete and the team. Right? All the different sports events, we have all the different type of record, right? We have personal best record, track and field, we have like world record, we have state record, we have venue record, we have different age group records, right? So there's all the different records. So they all we use that to evaluate your performance. And the third one is results, right? It's the final standing and performance. So that's also the statistic that we use to prove whether we have a good governance or not. That's the 5 R's in good governance in sports. Right. The next topic we talk about organizational unit. So this is very similar to organizational chart we discussed in the sports organization. Organizational unit, we look at in a governing bodies how many different levels of the manager's role are involved. Right, we have 5 different levels of the manager role. First one is a general assembly. Right, second one, executive committee. We have standing committee, we have a whole committee, which is a temporary committee, and we have executive staff. So we're gonna talk about each of them one by one. We're using Olympics examples, right? So executive committees are only staff that got paid, right? Others, they all volunteers. You want to serve there, you are volunteers. They all have a different purpose. So General Assembly, some organizations, they consider them as a Congress, right? It's a main governing body that usually will convince on a regular basis. So normally you have the members in the governing bodies. We have the annual meetings every years, right? And normally once a year. Right, these members include the president, vice president, secretaries. So we will meet together to make some very important decisions. All these members normally they're volunteer, which means they not get paid directly from the governing bodies. So IOC, for instance, so it has about 110 IOC members coming from all different countries, right? The body represented, and some of them are athletes, retired athletes. Some of them are sports officials. Some of them are successful businessmen, right? So they will represent different areas, and they made a decision. For instance, General Assembly, they made a decision about which city will be hosting the next Olympic Games. So this kind of big decision normally made by Congress or General Assemblies, but they only meet once a year when you talk about those big issues. And the second one is executive committee, right? Executive committee in different sport has called different things. Maybe it called governing boards or councils. So it's a group normally selected by the General Assembly has been considered as the real power in the sports governing bodies. We talk about General Assembly, they only meet once a year, talking about big decisions. So a lot of time, there's some of small issue comes up in the organizations. So they need to go and figure out how we are able to address these issues and make quick decisions. So executive committees is normally like small portion of these members. They're gonna normally meet more often every single years to talk about some of the very basic issues and help the organization to make the decisions. So, for instance, currently IOC is making decision whether they should ban Russia from competing in 2020's Tokyo Olympic Games. This is a big decisions. So they have to make a decision. And here, the General Assembly we talk about, they only meet once a year. So a lot of these kind of small issue they don't really have the time to deal with, right? So normally this kind of decision made by executive committee. So they make decision more frequently compared to General Assemblies, right? And others, including standing committee, a whole committee, and executive staff, right? Standing committee normally they are starting with special responsibilities. I'll give you an example. This is a FIFA standing committees, right? So they have a development committee, they have a referee committee, right? They have player stats committee, they have finance committee. They all have a very specific responsibilities. It's kind of similar to the department that we were talking about for all organization. They normally develop by functions based on all the different functions, right? So these are standing committees. So they meet sometimes a year and help the developments of the developments of the governing bodies. And the next one is about the AHO committee, which also has been considered as a temporary committees. So temporary committee they normally deal with the short-term basic need and issues. For instance, when IOC is trying to evaluate the city who want to bid for 2032 Olympic Games. So they will need some IOC members to work in this process to done evaluation, to go to visit every city to see whether they have the infrastructures to host these Olympic Games or not. So those are the members who selected only to do these short-term jobs. When the job is over, this committee is no longer existing. So those are temporary committees. Right. The last one is executive staff. Executive staff is normally employed by the organizations to mainly responsible for the daily operations. They're hired, they got paid, they're not volunteers. Right. Other committee members, right, including executive committee members and general assembly members, they are completely volunteers. Right. They're not getting salaries from these sports governing bodies. Right, so those are their organizational units. So the last topic we're going to talk about is the two legal documents. Right, first one is the Constitution, another one is a bylaw. Right, we all need use all different policies, but we are normally put that into two legal documents, Constitution and bylaw. So constitutions of the organization normally contain those fundamental policies which govern its operations, right? So they normally describe what you are, what you normally do. They cover the fundamental principle, but they don't normally describe specific procedure for operating your organization. So in the Constitution, normally they cover things like mission statements, vision statement of the organization, what are key values, right? We talk about in the first half of the semester, right? What's the name of the organization? What the purpose, why we existing? Who are the members? What is the organizational structure? For instance, MFL, right? If their constitutions, they will indicate what the mission visions, who are the current members, 32 teams, who are the current members, what the organization structure looks like. Right? So those are broad structures, core values has been included in the constitutions. By law is the establish of specific rules and guidelines by which the groups is to functions. For instance, we talk about MFL's membership, 32 members, right? So, and the Constitution, they listed 32 members. By law, they will introduce a little bit more about these membership rules, how these members has been selected, right? Whether the members are allowed to be relocated from one city to another cities. If they're allowed to be relocated, who need to approve these decisions, right? So, and how many percent of the members need to say yes in allowing one city, one team relocated from one market to another market. So they introduced more like specific rule in terms of how we're gonna select these persons. What if the member decide to reside? What's the residing procedures, and what are the basic rights and duties? Right? They give you more specific idea about all different policies. Right? So those are the differences between these two legal documents. One is the Constitution, another one is by law. Okay, have a quick review about what we have learned today. So first of all, today we talk about the definition of sports governance. And also we talk about the differences between governance and management. We talk about governing bodies. You should know what the governing bodies, what the differences between organizations and governing bodies. We talk about the standards of the good governance in sport, 5R, right? Regulations, rules, results, records, right? So those are basic standards. And then we talk about organizational unit, general assembly, executive committee, executive staff, and a whole committee, right? And then we talk about the legal document, constitution, and by law. Okay, so that's it for today. If you have any questions about today's content,